Hello, you're very welcome to another Killer Queen conversation. And today it's actually a mini pod. It's basically myself. I've been asked on email, I got a few direct messages as well regarding the podcast, telling me that people have been enjoying it, which is fantastic. Um, but this is basically just a small mini pod where I can explain what has been happening on the podcast, on the website, and on the YouTube channel in the past few weeks. And also, some of the queries were people asking me what exactly are my answers to the questions that I'm posing to the guests on the podcast. So I'm going to go through the podcast as I would if I was asking the same questions to my podcast guests, and I would be answering them for myself, my own thoughts on Queen, on music, that sort of thing. So sit back and relax, and I hope you enjoy this mini pod. But before we start, I'd like to thank everybody who has already subscribed to doing a podcast episode. And I know that the podcast episodes have fallen away over the past few months. I have been very, very busy between work and a few other things going on. Also redesigning this particular space, the music space that I have here. And it's been quite a busy few months. And so therefore, putting together a podcast in any form is difficult time-wise. But my main problem was trying to get access to the people who have signed up. In other words, they were free when I wasn't, and I was free when they weren't, and so on. So I'm going to change things up in season 2. This will be the end of season 1. My mini pod would be the end of season 1, and I'm looking to do a different format in season 2. So if you are enjoying the podcast, please wait until season 2. I think things will get a lot more enjoyable from the point of view of seasonality and ongoing episodes happening a lot quicker, that sort of thing. So I have plans afoot to change the way I'm actually engaging with people who've signed up already to do podcast episodes and that sort of thing. So hopefully we can grow this podcast, this Queen podcast, as we move forward. It has been a learning process for myself. There's quite a number of things that we need to do to get the podcasts on YouTube and also onto things like Buzzsprout and all of those things like Spotify and so on. So thank you for your patience. Thank you so far to everybody who has engaged with the podcast and my guests prior on season 1. As I said, a learning process, but let's move on to season 2 in the fall or in the autumn, as we say over here in Europe. So thank you very much so far. And let's go on now and do a mini pod as if I was asking people the questions for myself on the podcast. So normally on this part of the podcast, I ask people how things are going and what people are doing. So right now I'm in the middle of preparing for some shows. I've got a show in California on the 13th of June in a place called Arroyo Grande. And after that, then we have a summer break and we have a fantastic, huge show celebrating Freddie's birthday on the 5th of September in Las Vegas. That's in the Hard Rock Cafe. So if you want to find out more, you can visit celebratingqueen.com or you can check out the Hard Rock Cafe in Las Vegas for more information on details on ticketing and so on. They're all on those two places. So right now I'm basically sorting those things out and trying to get prepared for that. And also I work as a trainer. I do training for things like digital marketing and Microsoft Office and a myriad of other areas, and I do private contracting as well. So I've got a busy day ahead of me now after I record this. So yeah, it's busy enough, and I like being busy, so that's always a good thing. Now, for those of you who don't know about myself, my name is Shane McDonald. I set up Shane's Queen site around 2002 when I realized I had a number of Queen chords for Queen songs already transcribed by myself on paper. So I started typing these onto basically really standard HTML files. At the time, HTML was the way I created the website. Everything was done from scratch. I think I had Microsoft Front Page to help me format some of the items. But yeah, it was a very, very basic time back then. And the web has really grown and advanced since then, as we all know. But way back then, like there was no WordPress, there was nothing. You had to create the website from scratch. So yeah, I set up in 2002 and it grew and grew. And around 2018, I created the YouTube channel. I didn't really engage with it until I realized that the Seven Seas of Rye intro that I recorded was after getting 66,000 views, which was quite large. And so I started doing tutorials on YouTube then around 2020 or thereabouts. So this is where we are right now. The podcast is fairly new to myself. I'd like to thank Daryl Craig Harris, our bassist in Celebrating Queen, for helping me kind of get some areas like Buzzsprout and Podbean and all those things set up where we put those out onto Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music and those sort of things. He was a great help to me. And I would definitely check out Daryl's podcast, Music Matters. It's a fantastic website. I think he gets like 1 million downloads a month on that. It's a huge and a really interesting podcast. And he's interviewed people like Steve Stevens and people from Motown and people from Muscle Shoals recording studio areas. And it's just, he's a phenomenal bassist as well. So definitely check that out. So another thing I ask on the podcast is what sort of music was playing at home when you were growing up? Now, my dad had a fantastic range of albums, and I used to love looking at the artwork because one of the music groups that he loved was the Moody Blues. So there was quite a selection of Moody Blues albums at home, and the artwork, if you haven't already seen the artwork on those albums, definitely check it out. It's surrealist, it's freaky, it's interesting, it's very well done. And I do remember finding Nights in White Satin, and but I found it on cassette for some reason. I think he must have recorded it onto cassette, and it was probably for the car. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was on cassette, and I found I put it on. I think I was about 5 years old, and it blew my mind. It was like, wow, there was an orchestra, there was poetry, there was flute, there was. I never heard anything like it. So that was probably my first experience of understanding that music could play quite an important part in how someone feels, or that there's an emotional link between music and listening to it, you know. So other music he had was there was ABBA, certainly a few albums of ABBA, a few Irish country music albums, and then there was Glenn Campbell. So Rhinestone Cowboy was a favorite of mine when I was young, and that was definitely one I would play a lot. And I only recently found out that all of the albums of Glenn Campbell that were recorded and sold in Europe were actually pressed at a vinyl pressing factory that was actually literally in a straight line from where I am right now, about 2 kilometers. Never knew that. Found it on a website called RTE.ie, which is the national broadcaster for Ireland, and they have an archive, and it shows the Ferrybank vinyl pressing factory that was creating all the albums for certain artists, and one of those artists was Glenn Campbell. So yeah, growing up, that was kind of the music that I was listening to at that time, and I didn't really engage. In other words, I didn't really buy my own music at that time. It was really late on that I started buying my own albums. I just I didn't really engage with it for some reason. I loved music and I loved hearing it on the radio, but I never actually went out and started buying albums until quite late on. It was probably after Freddie died I started buying more of the Queen music on cassette and later on CD. So yeah, that's kind of my background on music. Now, so um, after this, I asked people kind of, did they play any instruments? And as you know, as you can see behind me, there's piano, and I do play keys in our tribute band in Celebrating Queen. But I do also play crappy guitar. So I love playing guitar, and I can play most of the Queen solos, and I can play a lot of the riffs and so on. But when it comes through the amp, it's probably my muting, it's probably my hand position, it's probably how I'm plucking strings. The notes are all there, but not necessarily in the correct order, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so I would definitely love to do a bit more on technique on guitar to make my playing a bit cleaner and to sound that bit more precise. Because yes, I know where all the notes are and I know how to play all the solos, but it doesn't sound the same. So Now we're on to a section that I call the fan experience and the discovery. So how did you first discover Queen? Well, my cousin gave me Queen 2. Queen 2 was my gateway drug into Queen. So he gave me the cassette of that, and within 20 minutes I was hooked. And after that, then Christmas 1993, I purchased the original 1973 Queen debut album, self-titled Queen. And after that, I started buying more and more of the albums. I think I went backwards from A Day at the Races, and I went back as far as, I think it was Day at the Races, Night of the Opera, and then Sheer Heart Attack. And after that, then I started going forwards slightly. I got Jazz, and then I got News of the World, and then The Game, then The Works, then The Kind of Magic, then The Miracle, then Innuendo. So I kind of had a weird route through. I didn't go sequentially. I started going forwards, then backwards, forwards, backwards, and after that, then I did start going sequentially after that. So yeah, I do remember buying my first Queen albums, and it's a nice memory to have about listening to them for the first time. I do remember listening to Jazz for the first time and listening to Mustafa, and I was wondering, wow, that's an interesting first song for an album, you know. And I'm not sure if you probably would do it these days. I'm not sure if Queen were around now, if in right now, would Mustafa work, you know? So, but yeah, I do remember that. Do you remember the first Queen song I ever heard? Well, the first Queen song I ever heard was probably Bohemian Rhapsody. My cousin had Greatest Hits 1 on vinyl, so I think he played it for me because it was quite a funny song. As regards, it went all over the place. There was piano, opera. Um, and then I think after that, he moved forward and he played me Fat Bottom Girls. Again, 8 years old, and there's a song that's just so weird and so funny. So I think he just played that one for me. Then in 1984, I remember hearing Radio Gaga on the radio. In 1986, I think I had a Now Greatest Hits one album or one of those things, and A Kind of Magic was on that. But of course, that after that, then I started getting more into Queen. And so they were my first few Queen songs that I remember hearing. Um, so first Queen album, as I said, that was Queen 2. And how many Queen albums do I have? Well, I have all of them. You would have to have all of them. I think if you were trying to learn all the Queen songs, you have to have something as a resource to play. So normally what I do is I put the album on. At the moment, I'm using Spotify, but back in the day, I would put in my cassette and play it through headphones, and then I put another pair of headphones over that. So I have the audio from my cassette player coming through the first set of earphones, and then piano earphones going over that. So I'm playing along with them. And if you're learning piano, it's definitely a good idea to play along live with a band or a click track, because that keeps you on tempo. That keeps your tempo solid. One of the things Brian May said about Freddie Mercury was that he was like a metronome. So when he played piano, he was percussive and he was really, really on tempo. So he never really lagged or went forward, which is the tendency when you're playing. So when I'm playing, I'm always trying to hear the milestones. So for example, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, for example, you have that little bass run, doom, 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 doom. And in there, there's some clicks, doom, 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 doom. And I see them as milestones. So when I go doom, 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 stop, doom, doom, doom. And so you're using the music to bring you through. So if you are learning piano, try and listen for those little cues that will help you work out, like, when do I come in? When do I play the note? So that's probably a good tip. And that's kind of what playing with music will help you discover. It'll help you discover, like, it's not always on the note. Some of the Queen, when you're playing Queen, for example, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you're off the beat, or sometimes Fred will come in just before the beat with the piano. So always be listening out, always be looking at what musicians are doing, because if you are writing songs, then you can use those techniques. I recently helped a friend of mine, Ray Mullins, a fantastic songwriter here in Waterford, and Ray asked me to put some keys to one of his songs, and the first time I ever used chromatic rundown. So my top note was always chromatically going down through the semitones as I was changing chords, and it was quite an effective technique for the chorus. So, and again, I don't think without Queen that I will be doing that, because it's some of the things that Freddie would do. Like Bohemian Rhapsody, there's a lot of chromatic work in it, so you're going down through all the notes. So next question I would ask would be, have you ever seen Queen live? Well, I haven't seen Queen with Freddie. I saw Queen with Brian, Roger, and Paul Rogers in Le Zenith in March 2005, I think it was, and it was an amazing show. I found some bootleg content online of the show. I just amazing to see it. It was really a really crappy footage because it was taken on one of those little flip phones back in the day when video quality on phones was really poor. Now, question 5. If you could go back in time and attend one Queen concert, what would it be? Well, I would definitely love to go and see Queen live at Wembley or Queen in Montreal in 1981, because they're the two concerts that I would have used in my early days when I was learning Queen. So I put on the whole concert and play along with it. My uncle gave me Queen live at Wembley on VHS around 89. I think it was shown on the Tube, which was a Channel 4 music program at the time. So I definitely played that one to death, playing it and watching it. So yeah, those two shows have a special place. But definitely maybe going back and seeing the Rainbow, maybe that would be amazing to see as well. So yeah, question 6. Did you watch Live Aid live? And if so, where were you? Well, I did watch Live Aid live, and I was actually in my cousin's house, the guy who gave me Queen 2 back in 1992. So in 1985, in July, I was in his house, and just coming up to around 6:30, he said, "Right, shut up, everyone. We're watching Queen." And Queen came on, and at the time, yeah, I really thought it was an amazing show. Um, I didn't get who Queen were because like that was his thing, that was his music, and I wasn't really deep into music. I love playing music, like so I would play my piano at home, quite basic at the time, but I wasn't into learning songs at the time purely because I hadn't got that far as regards my playing technique. So, but I do remember, I actually remember it was a really sunny day. Um, I do remember it was warm. I do remember that we were where we were and what was happening at the time. So yeah, I have fond memories of Live Aid, and I'm very happy I saw it live. But yeah, I've watched it again on YouTube on multiple rotations, just for pure, reminiscence. Next, we move on to things like favorites and deep dives. This is another section where we look at things like favorite songs and favorite members and so on. So question 7 will be, what is your favorite Queen member and why? Well, I think all the Queen members are very interesting. I got a book in 1994 or thereabouts, which was Queen as It Began, which was the authorized biography of Queen. It has been re-released, and I have the re-released version as well. But the little blue book was my first book on Queen. And I found all the members very interesting, which is great because not many bands have members who are very interesting. There's a lot of bands out there who you don't really know much about. So like Freddie being the artist, and Brian being the astrophysicist, and Roger being dentist, and John is into electronics. They all had their own backstory, which is really nice. I think myself, Brian is quite interesting. From the point of view of his love of nature and his interest in astrophysics and astro. It's astrophysics, but you know what I mean. But Freddie as well, from the point of view of how he plays. I love the way Freddie plays piano, and I like watching him. I think he's very interesting. He's very, very shy as well, in interviews. So I don't really have a favorite member because I think all the members have something that give back to Queen. And I think that's why Queen are so interesting. And I did look at other music artists, Elton John, ABBA, Def Leppard. But when I learned those songs, they didn't really stick. They didn't really go in. But yet, when I learned this Queen song, it stayed in. And I think Queen is resonating with me. In other words, it is a band that not only the members are interesting, but the music is interesting, and the music is something that just stays with me. So yeah, so my favorite member, have none. Tendency for Freddie and Brian, purely because of their interests and my interests, that sort of thing. Then we move on to what's your favorite all-time Queen song and why is it special to you? Well, I don't really have a favorite Queen song because that changes with the day. I mean, when I say that the piano, my first song I nearly always play is "Don't Stop Me Now," purely as a finger warmer. Um, but I'll pick a song and it'll change. Like in the middle of winter, if it's raining out and I'm outside, I might put in my headphones and listen to A Winter's Tale, that sort of thing. Um, or if it's a nice summer's day and that sort of thing, I might put on something totally different and it'll affect me differently. So again, I think Queen have quite a large catalogue of songs, each have different flavors and that sort of thing. So in the same way, you're not going to go into an ice cream shop and order the same ice cream every single day. Um, Queen are the exact same to me because you're going to kind of go, well, I feel like strawberry today, or I feel like, lemon or chocolate, that sort of thing. So in the same way, when you put on Queen, I think it is a thing like, how do I feel today? And what do I want to listen to? Sometimes you want to feel that you want to listen to an upbeat song, and sometimes you want to have a slower tempo song or something that's instrumental, that sort of thing. If I had to pick one Queen song that perfectly encapsulate why you love the band, what would it be and why? Um, it's an out there one, but maybe Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, purely because it's one of those songs, if you show it to somebody who doesn't know anything about Queen, it shows how versatile the band is. A band in 1975 creating a sound that might be akin to something you'd hear in 1920, and doing it really well. Um, Also, you have something like Good Company. It's the exact same thing. You're showing a band that is creating um, amazing music that doesn't sound like it's from the time it is in. And then you have something like the Prophet song. It's totally out there. It's not a song that I ever go to because I find, it's I'm a more melodic person. I find that slightly jarring sometimes when I listen to it. And it's just the way I hear things. I don't hear songs as lyrics and music. I hear things kind of all together. So it just comes on me too much. So it's a Prophet song sometimes. I will listen to it, but it's not a go-to song for me. And I know that's probably controversial, but yeah, because I play piano as well, there's no piano on it. So I kind of have a tendency to go towards the Queen songs that have keys or piano on there somewhere, purely because I have an interest in that area. What's an underrated track that you think deserves more love? Well, Las Parablas de Amor is a fantastic song. I enjoy that one. Um, I think Scandal is under listened to and underplayed. Um, Spread Your Wings, I think should have been on the greatest hits. Teo Toriate, another fantastic song which I really love. Someday, One Day, I just love that song. It's a great song. So yeah, that's a few songs off the top of my head that I think definitely deserve more love. Which Queen album do you listen to most? Well, I have Queen 1, Queen 2, and Jazz on one of those micro SD cards, and that plugs into my music system in the car. So when I'm in the car, I have those already in the system. I have Spotify on the phone as well if I want to. And I would often listen to things like News of the World. I would often listen to Sheer Heart Attack, which is definitely, those two albums are pretty much non-skip albums for me. In other words, I would listen to them straight through without kind of going, oh, I've heard that too much, or I'll skip on to the next one. Um, so for me, Queen 2, Sheer Heart Attack, probably A Day at the Races, News of the World, and then Night of the Opera. They're kind of the top five in pretty much that order that I would listen to probably the most at the moment. So which era do you gravitate towards? 70s rock, 80s pop, or later years? Probably 70s into early 80s. When Freddie stopped playing more piano on the tracks because he wanted to do more running around on stage, I think. Yeah, I definitely love all the piano early rock stuff. That's that's my era. That I kind of, and I think it's because I got introduced to Queen, the Queen of that era. So Queen 2, of course, is where I started off, and then I went to Queen, and then I went to um, date the races. So all of my early experience of Queen was all the 70s stuff. So I think I resonate with that more and I gravitate to that as well. So, and also the first memory I have of Queen being played in a kind of a public space was when friends of ours were in someone's house and someone put on um, Greatest Hits 1. A friend of mine from school, a fella called Mick, had Greatest Hits 1 and he loved it. And he said, watch this, watch this, watch this section. And yeah, I remember listening to Now I'm Here and those hits on the drums at the very start. So yeah, so if you can think of all the albums I had at the early part and then listen to Greatest Hits 1, it's all 70s and very, very early 80s with the game. So yeah, so that's the era I would gravitate towards. What did you think of the Bohemian Rhapsody movie? Well, I thought it was a very well made movie. I really enjoyed it. There are certain sections which obviously are not in sequence, certain sections that have been really jazzed up for the movie. And I think it's testament to Queen. I think it's a good testament to putting something out there to say Queen were here and this is what they did. This is Live Aid. They did Live Aid. And I think it brings the music of Queen to a new generation as well. Because there's a lot of bands out there from the 70s and 80s that could very easily have died away only for TV. For example, like think of Kate Bush and Stranger Things, what that did for that song. So I think Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen brought them to a new generation because when I'm, for example, meeting people after shows, there's a lot of young people in the audience. I remember meeting a girl, I think she was about 16, 17, when we were in Utah. And she told me how much she loved Queen, loved the show, that sort of thing. And only a few days ago, the band, we got an email which had a snippet of a 3-year-old singing "We Will Rock You," and it was brilliant. It was great to hear this 3-year-old like singing a Queen song, and Queen kind of are 50 years old, and it's really interesting. So I think Bohemian Rhapsody brings the music of Queen to a new generation. So I think the movie is what it is. I'm not sure if they should make a second movie. I think the story will be quite dark, and I think there's a lot of stuff in there that unless they had a storyline that was so well written that you could say, yeah, okay, I get it was tough watch, but the storyline was amazing. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. What's my favorite Queen music video? Well, I think because it was recreated in Bohemian Rhapsody, I do like Killer Queen, where Freddie's in the furry jacket. I do like that one. I also like the video that they made in the 90s or late 80s. I think it was late 80s. It was Miracle, so it would have been 89. And it was a video for the Miracle where there was Queen and then there was a young Queen. So there was kids playing the versions of Freddie, Brian, Roger, and John. And I thought that was really good. I was quite envious at the time of seeing the kids doing that because I would have done that. But I think the ages would have been all wrong at the time for me. But yeah, those videos are great. Iconic, definitely Bohemian Rhapsody is an iconic video. And I do like the comedic element of that kind of magic where it's all cartoons and that sort of thing. So I think they're having a bit of fun there. And I know if you listen to the commentary of It's a Hard Life, it's hilarious to listen to Roger commentating on what he thought of that particular video because I know he didn't like the plot or the staging of that. Moving on now to fan picks. So Freddie's best vocal. Ooh, that's tough. I think Freddie has great vocals anyway. But I think if you isolate the vocals, Somebody's Love is great. It's very, very, very good. But I think I would need to listen to all the songs isolated before I could pick a Freddie best vocal. But if anybody ever did karaoke, I think this is the key. If you've ever done karaoke, try and do a Freddie. Think of the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in '92. Many bands had to bring the key down because they just couldn't do with Freddie. Freddie's vocals are high. So if you've ever done karaoke and you're trying to sing Freddie's vocals with power, it's really tricky. So I think, testament to that, I think Freddie's best vocal is Freddie. I think he carries off a lot of the songs. I mean, even think of The Show Must Go On when he was in quite a lot of pain. I think they said that he just took a few shots of vodka and just did it the whole way through. And I know at the top end, you probably can hear The Power Is Gone, but that's an immensely high song. That's quite a high song to try and sing. So yeah, just have a listen to all that. Brian's greatest solo. I do like his solo on Killer Queen because he didn't recreate the melody of the song. So in other words, Brian didn't just go along and say, "Oh, I'll do the same, the same notes as what Freddie is singing." I think that's what the key thing that Brian does in his solos is he never really recreates the melody. He creates a little counterpoint or a little different melody that's influenced by the song itself. So yeah, that's good. But the first Brian solo I ever learned was "Hammer to Fall." So that the solo in that song was the first one I remember learning on guitar. And I remember my sister banging on the door and asked me to shut up because I'd been playing it over and over again on repeat, just trying to get. So I'd been playing it on my guitar, quite crappily. And yeah, so I remember that. Okay, but he has some phenomenal solos, and I think again, if you have a guitar and you want to try and learn Brian solos, you realize very quickly that they're not easy. They're not easy solos. I tried doing "Keep Yourself Alive," and I can do the rhythm section, but there's no way I can transition from the rhythm section into the actual the bending that he does at the very start of the song. I mean, that's a fairly basic thing to do, but he's just varied. He's versatile. I just like his playing, and I think when you consider what he did on Good Company, creating those trumpets and trombones and flutes from a guitar, that's a testament to him. I remember Freddie actually had a small project before Queen, In Between Smile, called Larry Lurex, and Brian played guitar on it. He played a guitar on a song called I Can Hear Music. And somebody reviewed it on the papers and they said, great synthesizer work. Great synthesizer work. And Brian had played guitar on it. Now, look at the insides of all the albums from 1973 as far as the game. No synthesizers. That's where that comes from. Brian put that in there because he was really annoyed that people thought that his fantastic guitar solo on I Can Hear Music, someone thought it was a synthesizer. So that's why when you see no synthesizers, Brian is saying, I'm playing guitar and all this. So if you hear something that's weird, it's me. If you hear something that sounds like a trombone or a flute, it's me. So that's where that comes from. So I think Brian is a fantastic guitarist. And if you have any wonderings about what his greatest solo are, try and play them. And if you can't play them, chances are it's one of his greatest solos. I mean, he's always quoted. He's always quoted in the record magazines and the guitar magazines, in the top 10 at least. But yeah, so John's best bass line. I love his bass line on Millionaire's Waltz. That's a fantastic bass line. So if you haven't heard it, go online, try and find the isolated version on YouTube, which would basically search for Millionaire's Waltz bass line only or something like that, and you'll hear what he's doing in that section. Roger's best performance on a Queen track. I always like the drum solo in Keep Yourself Alive. It's quite interesting. And I think because the reason why I like it is because it's probably one of the first albums I had. So that was interesting. I like the fact that in Now I'm Here, there's two separate drum fills. So for example, he uses two different styles on that track. So you'll have to listen to it. But yeah, it could very easily have just used the same pattern on each section. But it's probably hard to describe without listening to the track. But yeah, there's a very interesting way that he merges two different styles for the fills that he's using. And I do like that of Roger. He's very interesting, and the way he hits, I think he hits the snare and the tom at the same time, or something like that. He does a very interesting thing. I think Brian hired him because Brian was auditioning drummers, and he had auditioned a few drummers during the day. And one of the things that um, Roger said when he met Brian, he says, "Just give me a few minutes while I tune up my drums." And Brian went, "Wow, he's tuning up his drums. I never heard that before." And that was one of the things that Brian said that kind of influenced why he took Roger on as drummer. So yeah, so that was for Smile. So there you are. If you could ask the band one question, what would it be? A very simple question. Any chance I could spend an hour and jam with you? Pretty much. That would be it, you know. I'd love to, grab a piano someday near Brian and Roger and say, right, let's hit out a few classic Queen tracks. So Brian, if you're listening, send me an email. Who do you think wrote the best songs? I think Freddie wrote some great songs, and the few songs that Freddie wrote and I don't like, if you know what I mean. I think they all contributed. Um, Brian has the songs that I think play best on piano. Like there's a lot of songs that Brian writes that play really well on piano. All Dead, Save Me. They're two of my favorite songs, and they're Brian songs. But yet, like Freddie writes very interesting songs on piano. So I mean, We Are the Champions, for example, really beautiful piano on that. Um, I do like It's a Hard Life. I do like, obviously, Bohemian Rhapsody is very interesting to play. So I again, goes back to what's your favorite song. I think who wrote the best song, depending on what type of song you're listening to at the time and what you want to listen to and what you want to play. So I mean, I learned Nevermore recently. I think it was last year I did a piano tutorial on Nevermore. And when you think you're playing it right, you're not. Have a listen. You've got to really listen to the detail within the song. And the chords were correct, but my patterns on how I was playing it was wrong. And I think it's very interesting that Freddie writes piano sections in the way he writes. And Brian as well. They write they play differently. If you know what I mean, they play different styles. And I like that because when you're playing Queen songs, you're actually expanding your knowledge of how you play music. And one of the things I always tell people is that my piano teachers were basically Brian and Freddie, because of the fact that everything I learned as regards piano and music pretty much comes from learning all the Queen songs. So if you are not interested in learning piano, um, from lessons when you go to learn Mozart and all that sort of thing, there's definitely room for you to pick up a few good songs on piano, learn a few chords, and it's not overly tricky to learn chords. I think I did a tutorial as well on how to play basic chords. So if you search through the content on my site, you'll probably find that tutorial on how to play basic chords, major, minor, that sort of thing. And if you know the formula for constructing chords, then when you pick up a book and you see the chord of D major or E minor or A minor or B flat minor, that sort of thing, you would always know how to play those chords using the formula that I show on that tutorial. So that's just an aside. But who wrote the best songs? There's a lot of fantastic songs in the Queen catalogue, and that's the joy of Queen. We've got four fantastic songwriters. They've all contributed fantastic songs to the Queen catalogue. So moving on to the last section of the podcast interview that I would normally ask is the questions made famous by Bernard Pivot and James Linton. So people who are doing the podcast can certainly opt out of these, but what's your favorite word? Oh, that's a tricky one. Joy. I like joy is a great word to have in your life, and it's always associated with good things. Least favorite word, hate. It's a word I really, really don't like at all. No, I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, no, it's a word that years and years ago, I used to have a boss that used to, oh, I hate that. I hate that. And kind of going, well, there's better ways to say it. Like if you don't like something, articulate what you don't like about it. Don't just say I hate it, or don't just say I hate her or I hate him. I mean, you have to really articulate your feelings about something and not use that word, if you know what I mean. It's definitely not something that I like seeing, So definitely my least favorite word would be that. What turns you on? Well, purpose. I think having a purpose in your day is what turns me on. Having something to do and having something at the end of the day where you can kind of go, yeah, I'm delighted, a good day, I got that done. And what turns me off? I think acceptance of sloth. In other words, people who would just kind of go, nah, we bought it. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to lay here now and just not do anything at all. Um, I I think that's why I don't like that, because I like purpose. I just couldn't live my life um, not wanting to do something. There's a difference between being able to do something and not wanting to do something, you know. So there's been days when I've been sick and there's no way I could have done anything. But that's not the same as not wanting to do something. I definitely wanted to do something, just had no energy or that sort of thing. So um, it's the acceptance of or the indifference actually to doing something. What sound or noise do you love? I like laughter. I like music. Um, Birds singing. I'm not sure if you can hear, but there's where we live, there's tons of birds, and they're all singing right now. And I remember being on the phone one day, and someone said, "What TV program do you have on?" I can hear birds, and I said, "That's not a TV program. That's my garden." So it's amazing to hear that nature. Just love nature. So any of those noises. What noise or sound do you hate? Well, we don't have kids, so a crying baby to me would be like nails on a blackboard. I just don't know what to do. I can't cope with that. So yeah, so for me that would be you know a word that I just or a noise I just can't fathom or do anything with. So yeah. What's my favorite curse word? Well, my favorite curse word is not a word. It's normally three or four that I run together. So I'll take random swear words and I'll shove them all together. And, you know, bollocks and piss and fucking bastard. And that's, that sort of thing. So they're kind of the words that will run together. And I'll normally do a German on it. And, in Germany, they put loads of words together and shove them together as one word. And that's kind of what I do when something goes wrong. I'll run a few of them off at once. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? Well, I have a huge interest in aviation, and if you ever look at my personal Instagram, which is at ShaneMcDonald.ie on Instagram, there's lots of aviation there, and I've actually done a few professional flight sims in the really professional setup where you have the full canopy over your head with all your panels. So, you can do things like turning on and off the seatbelt sign or turning on and off pressurization or, do rejected takeoff and, put on your spoilers and your reverse thrust and that sort of thing. And so you have the full control over everything. And, I have a really interested in that. I actually applied for Aer Lingus back in 1992. They were taking on pilots. I remember filling out the form and signing it off. Or did I send? No, I didn't send it off. I had filled out and I decided not to send it off because for some reason I thought that I would get my first choice on what's the college application system, which over here in Ireland is called the CAO, which I totally messed up and had to redo the Leaving Cert because I just I totally messed up that form. So I really probably should have sent off the form. I mean, I'm happy with what I did, but I still have the interest in aviation. So maybe at some point I might get a pilot's license. What profession would I not like to do? Hospital work because I can't stand the sight of blood. If I see blood, I'm on the floor. So I'd be no use in that particular situation. If I was stranded on a desert island, which Queen album would you take? I would probably take one of the Queen box sets and I would cheat. So And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates? Probably good job, or you're early, that sort of thing, something along those lines. So there are all the questions. I hope you enjoyed this little mini pod. As I said, it's a lot of work to try and get these podcasts out, and I was really, really hoping to do up to 10 in this first season up until up until the summer break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reevaluate how we do things on the podcast, and in September then I will send out, or probably in August actually, I'll send out the emails to everybody who was signed up so far, just to get an understanding of people's availability as regards times of day, days of week, that sort of thing. And what will happen then is when I have a schedule availability that works with one of those slots, I will make contact 3 or 4 days in advance, and we'll actually do the podcast then. So that's kind of one of the things we're doing. I'm also going to reevaluate how we do piano tutorials. So in the past, I've been trying to figure out what people want. Do they want the full explanation of how you play all the chords and how you do all the patches, or do you simply want to watch the actual tutorial itself? Basically, the top-down view of my fingers over the keys and the chords being displayed on top. So, do you want to see that, or do you want to see a full um, explanation of the song from start to finish, all the chords being shown individually, patches being shown, that sort of thing. So again, I'm seeing different requests. People are just saying just show the tutorial, and other people saying show us the full explanation. So I'm reevaluating all that. So in September, hopefully you should see a brand new setup as regards the Shane Queenside YouTube channel podcasts. So again, if you have any comments on YouTube, please leave them in the description below. I'm not sure if you have the facility to leave comments and that sort of thing on whatever platform you listen to the podcast online. But for now, thank you very much for everybody who has taken part on the podcast to date. And thank you also to people who have subscribed. We will be in touch in the next portion of the year, which will be September. We hope to get a lot of them done at that point, and I will try and do 2 a month at that stage, purely because we're going to reevaluate how we do all of the allocations and the recording processes and that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed this mini pod, and for now, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again very soon. I will be releasing one more piano tutorial before the summer break, and that will be One Vision. It would probably be the shorter version. In other words, just showing the tutorial, no introduction. And if people want to see the introduction then with more information about how to play the chords, how you play patches, we can do an extended version from that. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again very soon.